This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Okay, so here's everything you need to know about Yakuza Like a Dragon in one quest. Okay, so I'm walking down the street and I see these two guys arguing, and one of them's holding a bottle of baby formula and the other guy's like, give me the baby formula, man. And the guy's like, no, I need it. And then the guy's like, I don't care, give it to me. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And then words were exchanged. All of a sudden it's on like Donkey Kong. And then I have to kick the shit out of this guy who's trying to rob the other guy at the baby formula. And he's like, damn it, you beat me, I'm leaving. I'm like, okay, cool, job done. Then we hear a baby crying upstairs, and this guy's like, hey, we should feed the baby, but we don't have any hot water. And I'm like, don't worry, I'll take care of that. So I schlep halfway across town to find a cafe that's gonna give me some hot water, and then I come back and we mix the baby formula and we go upstairs. And when we get upstairs, we find this weird, kinky baby thing where this woman is feeding these grown-ass men baby formula or something, and they were all wearing nappies or diapers, I don't know what you Americans call them. And then I'm like, okay, this is weird. And then somehow we start fighting, because of course we do. And then I win the fight, and the guy's like, oh, I'm sorry, that was a misunderstanding somehow. Let's all be friends and drink baby milk together, I think. And then we stand there like fucking Homelander drinking baby milk. That's Yakuza. Game of the year. Okay, so Yakuza Like a Dragon, I have been sent a preview code for it on PC. I've played about 10 hours of it now, actually. I only had access to one chapter, chapter 5, which occurs about sort of 5 to 7 hours into the game, they told me. I could have spent a lot more time in chapter 5 because I kind of had access to the whole open world, right? But I didn't want to spoil the game for myself too much, so I'm going to go back and obviously play it at release. I had a really good 10 hours with this game. This is a weird one. Obviously, if you know Yakuza at all, you know it can get pretty weird. It feels like this is even more weird than usual. But overall, yeah, I love it, actually. It looks the same as the previous Yakuza games, but it's actually quite different. Number one, there's a different leading man now. This is a different story arc, different characters than the previous Yakuza games. That's a really good thing because, you know, it's hard to jump into Yakuza at this point. There are so many games and the story is always sort of building on top of itself. If you ever tried to jump into a Yakuza game previously, you'd often find like a lot of references to previous characters in previous games. It can feel quite impenetrable, you know? So this is a really good reset button for people like myself who aren't massive Yakuza fans, but they kind of want to jump into it and check it out some more. I really like that, especially given the fact that these characters are actually pretty great. The main character, Ichiban Kasuga, he's a bit of a dude. He apparently was born in a massage parlor. That's his story, I think. And he's ex-Yakuza, just trying to make his way in the world now, fighting through the criminal underworld, doing things which I won't spoil too much. I don't even really know exactly what he's doing at this point, because again, I jumped into the story in chapter 5. He's also joined by a party of people. One of them is a lady who appears to be some sort of hostess or something, I'm not sure. One of them is an ex-detective, and the other one is a homeless man, okay? I think there are going to be other party members that we recruit later on as well, at least that's what the menu indicates. But they're all pretty cool so far. The biggest change with this Yakuza game is that it's actually a turn-based RPG. So the previous ones were just action games. You're walking down the street, you just start punching on with people. There were separate buttons for punch and kick and combos and all that sort of stuff. Now, when you're walking down the street, you see a group of bad guys, immediately transitions to the sort of battle arena, but does so seamlessly, no loading whatsoever. You're straight in there, and you get this very Persona-inspired menu on your left, and you start selecting skills, and there's a basic attack which you can use, but you have specific skills that you can use, and there's guards and summon abilities as well. That's one thing I forgot to mention. When you kill the baby boss, the nappy man, you then get him as a summon, and you can summon him like this. These summons, by the way, are called Pound Mates. That's right, Pound Mates. There you go. That's a good name. Anyway, yes, it's a JRPG, turn-based JRPG, and it works brilliantly because the classes are just so weird and cool, right? Obviously, I have my Hobo Man, and his job is to basically stink everybody out. He focuses on creating awful stenches that will like damage enemies or weaken them. And my hostess lady can like shake a champagne bottle and spray people with it. And the detective is like a badass who has a baton that he uses to beat people down. And my, you know, Yakuza guy is just a Yakuza guy, just punches people. But what you can do later on is you can change jobs. So you get to chapter 5 and you get to this employment office that allows you to select different careers. And at that point, yeah, I can switch. So I make my Yakuza guy a breakdancer, and he literally breakdances people to death. I changed my homeless man into a musician, and he's now like strumming his guitar, beating it over people's heads, and he's, you know, dropping his album. What really impressed me about this is that it still felt like Yakuza, as in you're on the streets, it's all just happening there. It feels very kind of rough and tumble. If you hit the attack button and you're near a bike, your character will just automatically pick up the bike and throw it at them. So that whole thing that existed in previous Yakuza games is retained here, but it's all happening within that sort of turn-based framework. It feels really authentic, really fun, and it just looks fucking cool. In terms of visuals and performance, the game looks and runs beautifully. I was playing on PC, and I was running at 1440p. I had beautiful frame rates the entire time, at least 70 to 80 frames, constantly, even when the action was thickest. I had 0 crashes, and as I said, loading times were just so fast. Even when I was booting up the game from the menu, if I was transitioning between areas, if I was going from combat to non-combat, just really quick, you know, I mean, I'm no more than a few seconds at a time. So it already is optimized really well. There's a fair number of options within the PC port. This feels really well done, and that's not often the case with like Japanese games with the PC port. Usually they're a bit phoned in. Everything I've seen so far has been really excellent. Visually, the city, it's all set in Yokohama this time, and if you're familiar with Yakuza games, you'll know that they don't go for big open worlds, they go for really dense worlds, and it's no exception here. This place looks beautiful. There's a day-night cycle. There's just so many people walking the streets, so many neon signs and shop fronts and cars running around, and it just feels so lived in and real. I really enjoyed exploring this space, and even in the 10 hours that I spent with it, I started to become familiar with certain parts of the city, which is what it's all about, you know? What's really rewarding about Yokohama, though, is just how much there is to discover in terms of weird side content, right? So there are about 52 sub-stories in the game, which are essentially, you know, sub-quests or side quests or whatever you call them, but they're always full of either humor or heart. So in this instance here, I'm walking down the street and all of a sudden I see this guy peeking his head out, and he's like, oh, I can't come outside. I'm like, why? And he's like, because I'm naked. I'm like, okay, that's weird, but all right, sure. And then turns out he's not quite naked, he's covered in bubbles. And the reason he's covered in bubbles is because his grandma was sick, and he heard the news while he was at a bathhouse, and he was so overwhelmed that he had to just run out. And now he's running around the streets with no clothes on, covered in bubbles, and I need to get him some clothes, but we need to avoid water as we do it. And for some reason, there are people on the streets just throwing water around, and we need to avoid those. This other quest here is about a pawn shop guy, like as in P-A-W-N, settle down people, and he has all this junk outside his house, and everyone's like, why is that? And I'm like, hey man, you should totally get rid of this junk. It's rude to everybody else to have all this junk here. Turns out his wife died, and you know, he's really sad about that, and those are his memories of his wife. And I kind of convince him, hey man, maybe your dead wife would like it if you had some pride in your store. And he's like, that's true. I'm gonna fix my shit up, and I'm gonna clean my storefront, and that's that. But that's what I'm talking about, right? It's ridiculousness meets heart, and it's always just really engaging. And I think that's such a linchpin with side quest content. Most of the time, side quest content in video games is pretty boring to do. It's very much about the wrapper that you put on it, like the stories that keep you engaged. And Yakuza Like a Dragon, like the previous Yakuza games, they're just so full of these stories that hook you, you know? In addition, there's this weird capitalism minigame they've got going where you basically have to run a confectionery business which is struggling, and then you have to kind of take over management of it, and you will then make investments and recruit people from the street, and you will then set them to work, and you will fire people and make them redundant to cut costs, and you'll invest in new factories and stuff. And I don't exactly know how it works because I can only play a small amount of it at this point, but it's there and it's kind of embedded across the whole game. There's also something called Part-Time Hero, which basically is a collection of challenges throughout the open world. So it's, you know, talk to 50 people standing on the street or beat up X number of goons or whatever, as well as taking down specific bosses. So, you know, basically it gives you an incentive to engage the open world even more. I was doing a few of those as I was going and always enjoying them. It is open world tick box stuff, but because the open world is so much fun and there's so much to do and see and discover, I loved it. The core of the game, though, is a sprawling saga of, you know, this man, Ichiban, who's trying to make his way in the world. From what I could tell so far, it's very much about him bumping up against different mafioso, Yakuza, Chinese mafia, whoever else. I really enjoyed those sequences, which I can't really share with you here because they're under embargo, but I really enjoyed them because they just had this great sense of intrigue playing out through them. The game can be so ridiculous and over the top and silly, but when it wants to get down to some good, well-written crime drama, it can also do that as well. So again, can't spoil the plot details for you, but I really liked what I saw and I liked the way it was doing it. I'll make the point as well that I played the game with the English and Japanese dubs. I switched back and forth between the two of them. Both of them were great. I mean, obviously you expect the Japanese one to be great, but the English dubs can often be a bit hit and miss for JRPGs or Japanese games in general. This one had a cool cast and they did well, and it would be fine to play this game in English if you wanted to, although I know that most Yakuza fans would consider that some form of sacrilege. Anyway, that's Yakuza Like a Dragon. It's coming out around the launch window for next-gen consoles, so it's going to be out on Xbox One and PS4 and Xbox Series X, and that's all around the sort of 12th to 13th of November. A few differences in dates depending on platform. It's coming out on PS5 next year in March, so if you are looking to play next-gen PS5, there is a bit of a wait for it. I really enjoyed this 10 hours with the game. I think that, you know, it's just weird and cool and fun, and I think the transition to being a JRPG works surprisingly well. I think that if you're a Yakuza fan, you're probably not going to be disappointed with this. And if you are not a Yakuza fan, this is probably going to be a great entry point for what is a much-loved series. Anyway, that's the video, guys. Thank you for watching. Stick around to hear from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Now, they are the single best place to go to if you want to build your own custom website. Building websites used to be really hard with lots of tricky tools. You need to hire people and administrators and whatever else and thousands of dollars. Not anymore. Now with Squarespace, you just create an account, you can log in, begin customizing one of their dozens of award-winning templates, and within minutes you have a professional looking website. They also have more advanced tools like SEO optimization, increasing your chances of being found online. They have things like calendars so you can schedule events. Heaps of stuff that just make it very easy to build your business or your community or just share your interests with the world. To get started, visit squarespace.com, and when you're ready to get serious, visit squarespace.com/skillup for a 10% discount on your first purchase of a website or a domain name. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching it. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down so I know to do better for next time. If you enjoyed yourself, consider subscribing, and if you really enjoyed yourself, maybe consider hitting that notification bell so you never miss a video. You can see my patrons here on the left. They're awesome. They're amazing. If you want to join them, check out my Patreon page. Thank you again. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.